Filmmaking is all about creating visuals to service a story. There are many aspects of this, including composition, lighting, movement, production design, color, and so many more. Color has played an important role in some of the earliest days of filmmaking. Often, it is overlooked as an essential role in the storytelling aspect, but it plays a very important part. Color has a psychological attachment to emotion, and filmmakers use this to their advantage. The psychology behind the effect of color is a naturalistic instinct, one that originally was utilized for survival. In filmmaking, color is a cue used to visually tell the audience how they should feel, but this all depends on how the color is used in the context of a scene. With the ever-changing technological advancements in the filmmaking world, more doors are opened up to how filmmakers can choose to help tell their stories. Color grading is the way in which colors are adjusted and stylized to help convey a certain visual tone for the story. It creates a mood for a film, one that coincides with the emotion of the story. The color grading process is important because it can be used to enhance or change the mood of what audience experience on their screen. As technology has advanced, the presence of color grading has become more abundant, being a tool for filmmakers to create visually distinct styles and personalities for their films. The evolution of color grading starts with the integration of color itself into celluloid film. Since colored celluloid was still not invented in 1895, the use of hand coloring was the way to go about getting color into film. Hand coloring is exactly what the name sounds like. Fine brushes were used to color the individual frames of a moving picture. A famous film that included this technique is the 1902 film Le Voyage dans la Lune, A Trip to the Moon, by Georges Méliès. Due to the extensive manual labor to make, these techniques were used for rather short films and not as common as the use of tinting and toning. More closely related to color grading, tinting and toning was the act of taking a black and white film strip and dyeing the entire frame a singular color. They made their debut in 1896, a year after hand coloring was introduced. The two, which were relatively similar processes with very similar results, were used to create a tone for each scene. Tinting used dyed gelatin to create a color on top of the positive print, whereas toning used a chemical reaction in which the silver was replaced by getting them to interact with other colored metal compounds, which would change the overall film color. Once colored film was invented and had become a staple in the technology of filmmaking, the process of color grading became a much more achievable thing. However, the process that it took to manipulate colors and style on film in post-production were quite complicated, and ultimately not used as often as we see in today's films. A film's look during the film era was mostly based upon what was used during the shoot, the way it was lit, the use of filters, and the type of film that was chosen to record on. If a film was altered in post-production, it wasn't to the extent that filmmakers are able to accomplish with our digital technology today, only being able to adjust the look by using blue, green, and red. Many films utilize an overall grade, focusing on changing the saturation, the strength of the color in the image, or tint. Bleach bypass was a popular desaturated look during the color film era, a look that can be found in such films as Fight Club and Saving Private Ryan. Still, during this time, color grading was relatively primitive. True color grading didn't come around until closer to the digital era. Once digital intermediaries were invented at the end of the century, film started to be post-processed on computers to affect the colors within the film. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was the first fully digitally graded film. They worked with a visual effects company, CINE, to alter the image digitally to create the look they wanted. The same company is responsible for the color effects seen in Pleasantville, a film that utilized digital technology to alter the coloring of the film to service the story. These films paved the way for the digital color grading revolution in the beginning of the 2000s. From this point on, color grading became an important part of the filmmaking process. Now that the technology was available, it was utilized thoroughly. From the mid-2000s until the mid-2010s, the color grading look of teal and orange became huge. Becoming known as the blockbuster look, it was very prominent in films like Transformers. During the mid-2010s, the desaturated look that was so prominent in cinema began to fade away in favor for the opposite style. Movies became more vibrant, choosing to use color as a means of emotional connection to the story of the film. Films like Blade Runner 2049 and Her used color to express the gravity of emotions in a visual form that played on the psychological effects we feel when seeing certain colors. This style is still very prominent and is what I would call the contemporary look, very set on exploiting the dynamic range of cameras and post-production technology that is being advanced so rapidly. The main player in this new world of color grading is DaVinci Resolve, a software company that started out as a color correction system, becoming one of the main color grading softwares that is used today. Originally just used by professionals, DaVinci was a whole setup that allowed colorists to be able to pick and choose areas to play with the colors, whether that be saturation, hue, or lightness. The hardware and software has already made the jump from being a professional $20,000 purchase to being a free commercial software for young aspiring filmmakers today. With the rapid advancement of technology in today's world, it is not hard to look into what the future of color grading will look like. As companies start to experiment more and more with artificial intelligence and machine learning, it is only easy to assume that this will become a part of color grading. Color grading takes time, and having to mask certain areas and play with exact values to make sure that each shot is perfect, it only seems obvious that this will soon be improved upon. Within the coming years, I can see machine learning being able to replicate looks applied on one clip onto another, as well as being able to understand what you are trying to specifically change inside of a piece of footage, rather than having a similar hue being affected when it's unwanted. The future is here with technology and will only help advance and streamline the color grading workflow. Color grading is an important aspect of the filmmaking process due to its ability to visually cue the audience into how they should feel and what they're experiencing. That's why films like Blade Runner 2049 and Her are praised for their use of color and tones, because they make the audience connect to the story and feel something. The advancement of technology has made this piece of filmmaking more prevalent, and will only continue to do so as it progresses.